Well, Mr. President, here we are, the 21st of December, 4 days to Christmas, and Congress is finally getting around to doing its duty on COVID-19 relief, as well as the omnibus appropriation bill, which will keep the government open, keep the lights on through the end of the fiscal year next September. I have to editorialize here that I think this is a terrible process. It's a terrible process. I just saw one of the Texas delegation House members saying, I'm expected to review thousands of pages of an appropriation bill and a COVID-19 relief bill in the next couple of hours and then vote on it this evening. We'll be in the same posture. But this is, as terrible as this process is, it was intentionally created. I'm sure that the appropriation chairman, Richard Shelby, and Leader McConnell would have loved to have a regular appropriation process to vote out each of the subcommittee appropriations, pass them with using regular order, giving the members of the Congress a chance to offer amendments and maybe improve the bill. But we weren't provided that opportunity because essentially the Democratic leader and the Speaker of the House of Representatives understands that this kind of broken process empowers them to the detriment of individual members of the Congress and to the detriment of the people we represent. It empowers them, not the rank and file members. So I believe this is, and the same thing is true on COVID-19, of course. We passed the CARES Act in March. We tried to come back and replenish some of those funds. We're successful in doing so, for example, in the Paycheck Protection Program. But there was obvious that there was more need, and on at least 3 occasions, maybe 4, but at least 3, we offered another $500 billion in relief, only to be blocked by Democrats here in the Senate. Speaker Pelosi was candid. She basically said, well, this is about politics. We don't want President Trump to get credit for Congress stepping up in a bipartisan way to provide relief to the American people in the run-up to the election. So this is where we are. We know what we have to do. We have to prevent the government from shutting down. We know that there's genuine need across the country for more COVID-19 relief, so we need to do that. But I would also point out, we're going to do roughly $900 billion of additional COVID-19 relief bills when Speaker Pelosi and the Democratic leader in the Senate, Senator Schumer, turned down a $1.8 trillion offer from Secretary of the Treasury Mnuchin. So rather than accept twice as much earlier because it didn't fit their political playbook, now they're accepting half when they realize they've run out of runway. Well, Mr. President, the months-long stalemate is finally broken. Yesterday evening, the so-called four corners, the Speaker, the Republican leader in the House, the Democratic minority leader here in the Senate, Senator McConnell, they've reached agreement on a bipartisan package of bills to support the American people through the continued fight against COVID-19. And despite my comments about the process and what brings us here, with so little time and ability to affect some of the content, I hope this legislation will pass and reach the President's desk in a matter of hours. I think we could all agree this bill could not have come soon enough. Since this summer, Republicans and Democrats have been miles apart on the size and shape of the next COVID-19 bill. Democrats, as I indicated, wanted a $3 trillion bill they called the HEROES Act, while we supported a more targeted approach. That's when Speaker Pelosi uttered those now famous words, "Nothing is better than something." Well, I've always believed that something is better than nothing. But the big picture disagreements prevented any progress from being made, even though we, by and large, agreed on about 80% of what needed to be done. And that is included in the bills that we will vote on here in the next few hours. Well, after the election, the Speaker and Democratic leader here in the Senate, I guess, decided that they no longer needed to hold the American people hostage because the election had now come and gone. So there were bipartisan negotiations that broke out, which have led to targeted package bills, to a targeted package that can earn the support of both parties and the signature of President Trump. It's safe to say there could not be a more urgent need for action from Congress. The last several days have proven that we are indeed at an inflection point, a turning point in our ongoing fight against this virus. One successful vaccine has already been administered to thousands of healthcare workers across the country. In my state alone, the governor estimates that 1 million people will be vaccinated by the end of this month. That's something we should all be thankful for and applaud. And Friday evening, the FDA authorized a second safe and effective vaccine made by Moderna, meaning that millions more doses will be reaching Americans, in particular our frontline heroes, in the coming days. These are developments that we've been waiting, hoping, investing, and praying for, but it's not a silver bullet. We're still battling this pandemic, and it's likely to be with us for the foreseeable future. But the good news is people who are particularly vulnerable because of their age or underlying chronic illnesses will likely be able to get the vaccine no later than March. And Dr. Fauci said by June, anybody in America who wants the vaccine can get it. Well, this next phase of our fight will determine how quickly we're able to defeat COVID-19 and regrow our economy. This legislation will clearly help us get there. First, it will provide the needed support for vaccine distribution. Not only is there been a modern-day medical miracle in developing these safe and effective vaccines, now the logistics of getting it to 330 million people in America are just completely daunting, but it's happening. Millions of doses have already been delivered to hospitals across the country. And in the coming months, millions, tens of millions more will be distributed as we launch this massive vaccination campaign. And while the cost of the vaccine has already been covered, the range of associated expenses that come with it have not been. For everything from transportation infrastructure to deliver the vaccines, to ultra-low temperature freezers to store them, to personal protective equipment for our healthcare heroes to safely administer those costs have added up and need to be provided for in this legislation. This legislation will, in fact, provide billions of dollars to help cover these kinds of costs and ensure the race to distribute these vaccines is as successful as the race to develop them. Part of that is through relief for airlines, which will transport the vaccines to communities across the country. This assistance will enable our airlines to carry out their important role in the vaccine relay race, all while keeping their employees on payroll and preparing for a strong post-pandemic recovery. These two successful vaccines so far are moving us closer and closer to the end of this crisis, but we still have a ways to go. And the American people need and deserve our support in getting there. Millions of workers have no way to earn a paycheck. Food banks are experiencing Depression-era lines each week. Farmers and ranchers have lost their traditional markets, small businesses are sinking, and parents and teachers are still worried about a safe return to in-person learning for our students. This targeted relief package will send desperately needed support to each of these groups for each of those causes. The workers who had the rug pulled out from them earlier this year will continue to receive the federally enhanced unemployment benefits under the CARES Act that would otherwise expire the day after Christmas. And state unemployment benefits will be bolstered, as I said, by $300 a week in federal benefits through March 14th of next year. We will also provide a second, more targeted direct payment to the hardest hit Americans with up to $600 per individual. That means that a family of four making up to $150,000 will receive $2,400 in the coming days. This bill will ensure that the basic needs of low-income households, school children, and those in long lines at food banks will be met. It also provides $13 billion for a time-limited federal nutrition benefit increase, as well as at least $1.9 billion for the coronavirus food assistance programs at food banks. Our farmers and ranchers and producers who've lost significant or all the value of their crops will also receive $13 billion in agricultural assistance to strengthen the farm safety net, which benefits us all. This has been a difficult year for millions of families in Texas and across the country, as parents have worried about how to pay bills and buy groceries, let alone Christmas gifts under their tree for their children. I know this will not erase all of the financial uncertainty, but it will go a long way to provide some help to those whose livelihoods have been thrown into chaos. And I hope it will also provide reassurance for the parents and teachers who've worried about a safe return to in-person learning. This legislation provides $82 billion for education and will help our K-12 students, colleges, and universities get their education programs back on track. This relief bill will also extend additional support to Texas small businesses. Our small businesses continue to struggle. With the arrival of winter weather, that's been especially true for restaurants and other businesses that have relied on outdoor seating. Many of these businesses utilize the Paycheck Protection Program to help them cover payroll and other expenses earlier this year. But the program expired in August, and our hardest hit small businesses are in dire need of more support. This legislation will provide another $284 billion in the Paycheck Protection Program. This has been an enormously successful program in my state, with 417,000 loans that are convertible into grants under certain circumstances, worth some $41 billion. This has been a lifesaver for many of our small businesses and the workers they employ. The hardest hit businesses will be able to take a second draw of the PPP and provide more stability for their businesses and employees until this crisis ends. I'm glad this bill also includes language from a bill I introduced to clarify tax deductibility for business expenses paid with a forgiven PPP loan. The average PPP loan in Texas was $99,000, and without this change, those businesses that received that PPP loan and grant would face a $36,000 tax liability. That would start to show up in January with the estimated taxes being paid by many small businesses who pay on a quarterly basis. That sort of unexpected tax liability would be a slap in the face for those businesses that saw this life ring and decided to grab hold of it. This change will ensure loan recipients aren't saddled with an unexpected tax liability that could absolutely sink their struggling business if they've been hanging on by a thread. I appreciate Chairman Grassley of the Finance Committee, Ranking Member Wyden, and their staffs for fighting to include this change, which will clarify that these expenses should have been tax deductible all along. That's what Congress intended in March when we passed the CARES Act. I'm also glad the omnibus was paired with this package includes other legislation that I introduced with our friend Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, called Save Our Stages, designed to help our small independent entertainment venues across the country from closing their doors for good. These Main Street businesses were excluded from the original Paycheck Protection Program, even though they were among some of the hardest hit small businesses. Event venues were the first to close when COVID-19 hit, and they're likely to be the last to open once it's gone. This funding will help them stay afloat until that long-awaited day finally arrives. So I want to thank Senator Klobuchar, who's been my partner in this bipartisan effort, as well as Senator Rubio, who's been a champion for these venues during the final critical stages of negotiations. The government funding legislation includes a number of other bipartisan bills which have nearly unanimous support in both the House and the Senate, including a bill I introduced with our colleague Bob Menendez of New Jersey. This legislation will finally, after 25 years or more, establish a National Museum of the American Latino that will improve Latino representation within the Smithsonian Institution. This museum will honor the contributions of Latinos throughout our nation's history and give their stories a brick-and-mortar home here in our nation's capital. I'm thrilled that generations of Americans will be able to get a more accurate view of our nation's history when they visit this new Smithsonian Museum, and I can't wait to be among its first visitors. There's no question there are additional measures I'd like to have seen included in the coronavirus relief legislation, and I'm sure that's true for every member. But this targeted package includes critical funding and support for Texans and Americans at this watershed moment, and it will break the stalemate which has paralyzed Congress for months now. The American people are suffering. It's not time for politics as usual. It's a time to come together, to compromise, and to make good on our commitment to support them. I appreciate the work of our colleagues who fought for a deal that will give our country added strength during this next critical phase of our fight. And I look forward to voting for this legislation. Mr. President, I yield the floor and would note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President,
Senator from Texas.
I'd ask quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Banking be discharged from further consideration of S-371 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
S-371, a bill to provide regulatory relief to charitable organizations that provide housing assistance and for other purposes.
Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the Fisher substitute at the desk be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection? Without
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Commerce be discharged from further consideration of S-2429 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
S-2429, a bill to reauthorize the Coral Reef Conservation Act of 2000 and to establish the United States Coral Reef Task Force and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the Rubio amendment at the desk be agreed to and the bill be, as amended, be considered read a third time.
Without objection.
I know of no further debate on the bill, Madam President.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. The question is on passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill as amended is passed.
I ask unanimous consent that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Madam President, I now ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 3250, which was received from the House.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 3250, an act to require the Secretary of the Interior to conduct a special resource study and so forth, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time.
Without objection.
I know of no further debate on the bill, Madam President.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, the question is on passage. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill is passed.
I ask unanimous consent that the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid on the table.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 5472, which was received from the House.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 5472, an act to redesignate the Jimmy Carter National Historic Site as the Jimmy Carter National Historical Park.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
And finally, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Commerce be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 5126, and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 5126, an act to require individuals fishing for Gulf Reef fish to use certain descending devices and for other purposes.
Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time.
Without objection.
I know of no further debate on the bill, Madam President.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, the question is on passage. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The bill is passed.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the motion be considered to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Note the absence of a quorum, Madam President.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.